We are live. Sherry Ashlock says hello. We had no rioting in our neighborhood in Covington last night, so that was good. I didn't have to shoot anybody. So.
Good.
I think all the rioters are waiting to see what happens before they riot. I think they'll riot, but they want to see how mad they can get first before they do that. So we're going to be back in Genesis chapter 24 this evening. I didn't even put up a reminder. We've already got two hellos. Sherry Ashlock and Mindy Morris both say hello when we say hello to those fine ladies. So Genesis chapter 24, we're going to backtrack just a little bit and pick up in verse 22. And let's go ahead and read through verse 27. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her wrists, weighing 10 shekels in gold, and said, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for us to lodge in your father's house?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." Again she said to him, "We have plenty of both straw and feed and room to lodge in." And then the man bowed low and worshipped the Lord. He said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in this way to the house of my master's brothers." Okay. We're looking at this story, which is the narrative of Isaac acquiring, and I think that's a fair way of putting it, acquiring a spouse, a wife, as opposed to going out in the way we normally find a life partner, a spouse, a husband or wife. We normally have to do it ourselves, don't we? We got to do all the heavy lifting, take them to the malt shop and all that, and get a malt with 2 straws, that sort of thing. Here, his father's servant, Isaac's father's servant, has gone out at his father's request, Abraham's request, to find a wife for him, and he is in the family that is pretty closely related to his own family. I started to say his father's family, but I guess it was his mother's family too. So he's keeping it within the family here, and we've talked about how the journey has been undertaken, the task was given, and the importance it was for Isaac to find really what it amounts to an ideal wife. Isaac needs, in this context, a wife that is beyond reproach, that there's nothing about her you'd say, well, he could have done a little bit better here or better there. And that's what he finds in Rebecca. Absolutely beautiful, very kind, gracious, generous, self-starting, I guess you could say. She volunteers not just to give the man a drink of water, but at the well here, but also water the camels. And the man is just dumbstruck for a while, looking at. He's amazed that this is God has answered his prayers so much. He too, the servant, has asked for God's blessing on his endeavors, and God has prospered him. He's getting exactly what he came to find here. And then we went through this a little bit, the part we read tonight, verses 22 through 25 last week, and then I added 26 and 27. So anything in that passage kind of stand out to you?
What we talked about last week was, was here a woman that, come, we have plenty of food, water, and place for you to stay, which would be a little unusual, at that particular time.
Is she's very hospitable.
Right.
And that's supposedly, and particularly in this culture, a key characteristic of God's people. Abraham is very generous and very hospitable when the strangers show up at his door. Lot is, when we look at the story with him and his daughters and offering his daughters to the men of Sodom, it's a very difficult story, but one way to kind of understand it that is favorable for Lot, still struggles for us, but favorable for Lot is that it is an act of radical, extreme hospitality, that I've taken these men into my home. Anything that I have that can help and protect them, they are entitled to, and that includes my daughters. I'm not saying that's the ideal interpretation for every person reading that story, but that is one way to do it, and come back to Lot and view him as the New Testament calls him, righteous Lot. This is a trend in this family, in the family of faith. It's a requirement really to be hospitable people, to be willing to share and bless and to love your neighbor and even beyond your neighbor as you would love yourself, as you would love your family.
So that's true. It should be hospitable nowadays, right?
I think it's one of those. It's really interesting when you look at. I think hospitality should, and graciousness and generosity should be hallmarks of God's people always. I'm not trying to. I don't think that changes. I think it's interesting when you see Jesus arrive on the scene and when he interacts with people. We talked a little bit about it Sunday morning. He kind of comes into their world and kind of almost takes over when he comes into their world. He gets invited to Simon the Pharisee's house and goes over there and has lunch with him. He invites himself to Zacchaeus' house. He's in our world right now. We can and should be generous and gracious. It's a little hard to have people in your home right now. I don't know what the laws are if they don't, if they're not related to you or whatever. The limits are pretty strict. And when we get back to kind of normal, hopefully we can demonstrate generosity. But as we try to really, if we want to be like Christ, one of the things he doesn't invite people over to his house very often at all, does he?
He has no house.
He has no. He gets invited. He creates a persona, an impression upon people that makes them want him to come into their lives, and that is a lot harder. It's hard enough. I'm not belittling the hospitality. It is a big act of graciousness to bring someone, especially someone you don't know well, into your home. And our culture, especially the last 20 or 30 years, has become so insular. People have their homes kind of set up exactly the way they want it. And the idea of going to someone else's home where the TV is at a different angle, or they watch it at a different volume, or it's not quite as big and nice as the TV I've got, or I don't get to sit in the comfy chair, or whatever the differences are, that is challenging enough. When you can get them to invite you into their home, that's really where they're bringing you into their. We're trying to get them into our lives, and maybe the real challenge and the task that lies before us is to get into their lives, and then do so in a way that we're welcome, not in a way that we're invasive and forcing ourselves in. And we're not the cold call salesman showing up, knocking on the door. Have I got a deal for you? When they're not even looking for it, but have them welcome us into their lives. And it's just, I think, food for thought. I think we do need to be generous people. We do need to be hospitable people. And what hospitality really looks like can change a little bit. I don't think anybody here would expect to give up their daughters to protect their guests. That's but we should be hospitable.
Some of us might not even have fathers for the family.
They may not be able to feed their camels.
What'd you say, Mark?
No,
He said
I said I might not have fodder for the camels, but, you know, it's interesting that you talk about that. Karen and I moved 5 or 6 times, and the first day we went to worship, at each place, somebody invited us home for dinner. 3 kids, 2 of them running like a bunch of rats, and the other one in diapers, and we were greeted with hospitality wherever we went, and it was certainly appreciated.
What changed, Mark?
Huh?
What changed?
I can't tell you what changed, the people have changed. Anyway, I invited Karen and I here one night. There was a man showed up, and we invited him. He needed a place to stay, so we invited him home. And it turns out he's a scam artist. And he not only he got me, but he got Bob Leach too, I think, in the process. And so not all people are not angels. We found out.
if you've never been taken advantage of, you're probably not a very hospitable person.
Is that what it is?
You know, when you extend hospitality, sometimes you're going to get taken
I feel
advantage of.
better already. I've been
Yeah. I mean, as far as what changed, to some extent, we can see it. You know, what is hospitable is somewhat a cultural context. I mean, the people, maybe instead of bringing them into your home or going into their home, you can't even do this right now, but you meet at Starbucks and for a cup of coffee or something. I can't tell you how big a sacrifice it would be for me to go to Starbucks because I don't like to pay $5 for a cup of coffee. But that's, that's whatever. That kind of, maybe it looks different now. And I think people are craving it. I think people are trying to find ways to connect with each other. And during this pandemic, whatever effectiveness it has had in terms of slowing the spread of the virus or whatever, deaths from other afflictions have gone through the roof. You know, and people aren't going to the hospital because they don't want to get COVID and they're dying of their heart condition instead. We talked about Sherry and Elmer. Elmer has to go to do, y'all know, I'm not going to reveal all the story, but y'all know what Elmer has to go through for that. And he has to risk getting COVID, which would probably be terminal for him he's a really high risk guy to survive it if it happens, but it's no chance if he doesn't go. So in this world, you know, and are we willing to let it change? Are we willing to be hospitable to people on their terms rather than our terms? I mean, you invite somebody over for dinner and they're lactose intolerant and they're pescatarian and you go through all the lists of gluten free and are you willing to accommodate their dietary requests? Because we went over to people's houses, if you didn't want something, you just didn't eat it, and that was that. And I remember going many times to people's houses and I'd see something that looked really good. I'd get a big scoop of it, sit down and take a bite, and I couldn't stand it. I mean, it was like, this is like the worst thing I've ever eaten in my life. And now you got a big blob of it right on the plate.
And Mom said,
Clean your plate.
My mom didn't say. My mom, honestly, she was. This is how it changes, I guess. My mom was like, if you don't like it, don't eat it. Don't be rude about it. Don't tell people, hey, this is terrible. But just don't eat it. And it takes something for the person when they see that. That's their food, and they like it, and they made it the way they want. And somebody doesn't want to eat it, are you going to get your nose out of joint for it? You know, my dietary issues, my weight problem and everything, and sometimes I'm more strict about it than others. I need to be strict about it all the time. I try not to eat desserts. That's one of the first things. I love desserts, but it was easy for me to give it up because I love everything else too. So I'll just eat other stuff. So I try to cut out desserts. And you go to somebody's house and maybe she's worked all day on a peach cobbler or something like that, and it's a big deal. And you say, well, I'm not eating desserts. Well, I worked all day on this. And their lips starts quivering, you know. And you go over to Europe maybe on a mission or just to visit or whatever. And I've heard this. When I was in college at Harding had a program in Florence, Italy, Huff. Harding University, Florence. You go spend a semester over there. I didn't do it. And you have to save up your general ed credits so you can take them over there, like art, history, and all that stuff. And you get to go see the museums and all that stuff in Europe. And they'd go to church. You're required to go to church while you're over there. And you go to a Church of Christ in Italy or France or someplace like that, and they invite you home. And what do you think they get out for the dinner? A big jug of wine. At Harding, if you drink, you get kicked out. And I don't know if they enforce it now, but when I was there, if they knew you drank alcohol, you were in big trouble. You were probably going to get kicked out. You're going to be disciplined in some way. So a family gets out a jug of homemade wine that granddad made 3 years before he died, and they take great pride in, and this is their peach cobbler. Oh no, I can't drink it. I can't have it. And maybe they respect it. Maybe they're fine, and you can always say, "Well, I'm on a Nazarite vow here at Harding. I can't have any strong drink or wine." And they'll notice but you do have to have a short haircut, so you gotta let that go, I guess. But anyway, what's their response going to be? Is it completely out of bounds for them to have their feelings hurt by that? I was talking to a lady when we lived in Central Arkansas. I don't want to give out too much because I think she's basically a very nice person. But she had gone on a missionary trip to someplace in like one of the old Belarus or one of the other countries that had been part of the Soviet Union. And after the wall came down, she was able to go over there on a missionary trip. And she was telling us about it. And she was staying with the family there. And she said, I had to teach them how to cook eggs. They didn't know how to cook eggs. Yeah, nobody in Belarus knows how to cook eggs. They may not cook them to your taste. I mean, some of y'all imagine if you fry an egg and that yolk is not cooked as hard as the white, then you haven't cooked the egg. Other ones, if I can't dunk my toast and just drench my toast in that yolk, then you've done it wrong.
Yours used to put it in grape jelly. They put the grape jelly in a dollop of grape jelly in the egg with the yellow showing. It would turn purple.
It was delicious.
It was good.
My mom never served anybody an undercooked egg. I can tell you that. That was never going to happen. And her eggs were always good. But some people like their eggs runny. So it's a delicate act, isn't it? I mean, it really is. It's one you're not going to get perfectly right every time. And you have to be gracious towards them, and they have to be gracious towards you.
If you get past the French and their wine, you're going to have your escargot.
And I have snails, and they're very good. I love them. Lots of good garlic on there, butter and garlic. Put enough butter and garlic on stuff, you can eat it, can't you? No matter what it is. So it takes for hospitality to really work, you have to have a good host and a good guest. And Jesus is his guest. And Paul makes this, just imagine this good little upright, probably very strictly kosher keeping Jew going out into a Gentile world where eating pig was like the least offensive thing they're doing. I try to be all things for all people. Try not to get hung up on some of this stuff, but it is hard. It is hard to think about. Some food is very cultural. How you eat, what you eat. The old saying, you are what you eat, is not really what the guy said. The guy said, if you tell me what you eat, I will tell you what you are. If you tell him, well, I eat breakfast at McDonald's every day, and then Wendy's for lunch, and then Burger King for dinner. He's going to say, you're an American. That's what you are. So they got us pegged that way. But so she's hospitable, not excessively, but exceptionally. In her context, in her culture, you show up and somebody offers you straw and camel food now. I thought Mark was, when he said he didn't have any camel fodder, I thought he was saying, I don't have any camels for your father. So, I'm not a smoke. So, and when I was a kid growing up, it was rude not to have ashtrays out for people who smoked when they visited your house, even if you didn't smoke. I may be talking about my mom too much tonight. She probably not like this, but my mother does not like smoking whatsoever. She's very intolerant of the smell and all that. She doesn't like it at all. When I was a kid growing up, she had ashtrays out for people to use when they came over. Now a lot of people who smoke don't even smoke in their own house. They'll go outside of their own house to smoke. That's a big change, isn't it? Now someone who smokes in your house is imposing on you, unless you too smoke. So, what it all looks like, being hospitable is a requirement, what that looks like. But it makes an impression on the man, that's for sure. And the man, when he sees and receives all this hospitality, bows low and worships the Lord. He begins the interaction with prayer. He prays to God. God blesses it. He makes the event prosperous. He prospers the endeavors. He prospers the endeavors of the servant of Abraham, and the servant of Abraham worships him. So we have prayer, blessing, or prosperity, whatever you want to call it, and then worship. He gives God the credit, even though there's nothing in this chapter where God says, Abraham, do this. He never tells the slave, go there. God is not an active participant in this story, but God is everywhere on it. God has done, the appreciation for what God has done has been expressed, even though we don't read that God is actually doing it. But from his people's perspective, yes, God is doing this. Okay. Let's move on a little bit. We got time she is a-flying. Verses 28 through 33. Then the girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. And Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, saying, this is what the man said to me, he went to the man. And behold, he was standing by the camels and at the spring. And he said, come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside, since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels? So the man entered the house. Then Laban unloaded the camels, and he gave straw and feed to the camels, and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. And when the food was set before him to eat, he said, I will not eat until I have told my business. And he said, speak on. So we'll come back to that here in a little bit. So Laban sees the bling bling that his sister has received and thinks, well, those are just material things. It's no big deal, right? I'm not so materialistic. Robin says in an act of hospitality to take them to McDonald's. That is one alternative. That is one way to be hospitable in our culture today. I guess she's singing, if I won't take them to Starbucks, I can take them to McDonald's. So.
Coffee's cheaper now.
And coffee, I think it's about as good. I'm not a big Starbucks fan, so. This is a little bit of an interesting passage about Laban because of what we know about Laban and how he's going to deal with his nephew down the road. Laban has got sharp eyes. Laban can tell that something's going on here. There's wealth to be had here. There's somebody that got some money. Somebody rolled up in our parking lot in their brand new Ferrari. We'd probably notice, wouldn't we? They'd probably scrape the bottom of the car getting into our parking lot, but that's because those things are slung really low. But I couldn't watch the election coverage last night, so instead I watched the old James Bond movies with Sean Connery in them. And, some of the characters, you could tell they'd got them suits off the rack, and you could tell that Sean Connery suits had been made by a tailor on Savile Row in London, England. You could tell. Signs of wealth usually do not go unnoticed. And Laban isn't going to let this sign of wealth go unnoticed. After all, it's just a sister, too. Huh? But he acts generously. He's kind of creating a conducive environment. And, there's going to be, he's also acting hospitable. But he has seen the rings, and he has seen, the ring and the bracelets. And Rebecca, I'm not saying she's oblivious to the wealth that's being in the care of the servant, but she seems to be moved more by compassion, by a sense of hospitality, by a sense of desiring to bless someone rather than there's maybe money to be made here. What do you think about Laban? We'll just talk about it and get him on the talk. A little bit of foreshadowing.
It's funny that Laban did the work. He's not, you're not getting the impression that Laban would be the one doing the work. He'd have somebody do it, but he's out there. Maybe he's wanting to check closely what all is what.
Let me park your car for you, and then you go through the glove compartment and he's got sharp eyes, and he deals sharply, certainly with his nephew, going down the road a little bit. And I think when I ask you what you think about Laban, I'm not just talking about it in this context, but what you generally know of Laban. I think he's a hoot. I mean, I think he's really funny, and pulling one over on your nephew, I mean, that you should be allowed to do that, I think, don't you think? I mean, that's what nephews are for.
To some degree.
Yeah, to some degree.
But not giving the wrong woman.
Maybe not just, I've given my nephew a hard time a few times, and but it is in love, and I think he would say that I've been pretty nice to him, so. Okay, well, we will read verses 34 to 49 and throw that open, and we probably have to come back to it next week, but we'll start with it. And so this is the servant talking. He's not going to eat until he's had his say. Verse 34. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master so that he has become rich. And he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and maids and camels and donkeys and lions and tigers and bears, oh my. Now Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age, and he has given him all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son. I said to my master, suppose the woman does not follow me. He said to me, the Lord before whom I have walked will send his angel with you to make your journey successful. And you will take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my relatives, and if they do not give her to you, you will be free from my oath. So I came today to the spring and said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, now you will make my journey on which I go successful. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and may it be that the maiden who comes out to draw and to whom I say, please let me drink a little water from your jar. And she will say to me, you drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son. Behold, I have finished speaking in my heart. Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder and went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, please let me drink. She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I will water your camels also. So I drank, and she watered the camels also. Then I asked her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets upon her wrist. And I bowed low and worshipped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who guided me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. So now if you are going to deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, let me know that I may turn to the right hand or to the left.
Is there a culture to have that ring in their nose?
Was it what?
Is it their culture to have a ring in their nose?
I think sometimes, I'm not sure if it was required or what. It was kind of a little bit of a sad day, I have to say, when my niece got her nose pierced. It was maybe one little tear came. I'm not sure. But the kids today do that sort of thing a lot, and it's really, again, uncomfortable for some of us old fuddy-duddies like me. It's hard to accept that sometimes, but it's one of those things. If you can't accept it, why can't you accept it? And how is that going to affect your relationship with the people that do that? And there's a player for the Dallas Cowboys. He's got two studs coming out of his nose, two silver studs. So it's going up inside. He's putting it through the inside of his nose, not just through a nostril. And I can't even imagine how much that hurt. But I guess if you're a football player, you're a tough guy, so you can handle that. I would cry like a baby if they did that to me. But they would be doing it against my will. I can assure you. If you see me with a strange piercing, know for a fact. Somebody held me down and did that to me. Sherry asked about putting a ring in a cow's nose to show ownership. Yeah. I don't think people were leading Rebekah around by the ring. Hopefully not. But this was a very extravagant gift. Basically, this is like a dowry, a down payment on. This is the wealth, the sign of the wealth that the master of the servant has. It's designed to impress. We talk about Jesus not inviting people home. Why didn't he invite people home? He didn't have a home, did he? They fought over his last articles of clothing at the cross. James warns us against honoring people who have really nice clothes and dishonoring people who don't have nice clothes and maybe have dirty clothes. And maybe something that has changed. It's interesting, though, we just read all this, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're reading the chapter straight through, we just covered all this. But they retell it, and he sees in it the moving and the blessing of God going on. And that's really the thing that jumps out about this retelling of it, is that God is making this happen. The God of Abraham is bringing about all of this according to his will. There's blessings, and he's maybe perhaps somewhat concerned that the deal will fall through. He really wants to make it happen, and creating in the context and letting Laban know exactly how all this came about is intended to Laban to go along with the deal. So he wants Laban to deal honestly and truthfully and faithfully with him. It's basically saying, I come in the name of your relative, deal faithfully with me. If you know Laban, that's not an easy task. That's asking a lot from Laban to deal faithfully. So when Jacob comes along, and Jacob is a sharp dealer himself, these two are headed for a collision course. Who's going to get the best of whom? Any other thoughts? Okay. Thank you for your attention and your comments.